Hello, hello, hello. I'm not sure how long this is going to take because this is my lecture on post-culturalism, which I've been threatening to do for the 100 or so people who are going to watch it. This is an interesting concept, post-culturalism. Now, you're probably thinking, Darren, there's plenty of culture out there. There is, but that's not what post-culturalism is. It's like post-industrialism. Think of post-industrial, where industrialism became commonplace. There was pre-industrial, there was industrial, then there was post-industrial. And you can say the same with post-culturalism. It's a watershed moment, I believe, in the development of our species. I think it's a very important part of our development. First of all, you've got to define what culture is. There are many levels of culture. First, you have like the arts, writing, art itself, photography, music, film, TV, and all those other things that we do that isn't necessarily work. So that's one part of culture. But culture also can be food, it can be religion, it can be the 9 to 5. It can be work itself. Your work can have a cultural aspect on your life. But what we're going to be looking at is the kind of the art part of post-culturalism. Now, in ye olde days, where did most culture come from? It mainly came out of the church. Mainly came out of religion. A lot of music and imagery, iconography came from religion. So that doesn't really bear much now on today's culturalism. There will be some believers, there will be some people that worship false gods. But yeah, in the older days, a lot of culture came out of religion, and even architecture, the buildings around us, that part of our cultural belief came from religion. And then, as we move on through the development of mankind, you will see culture being introduced via political areas, by, say, the king. There'd be culture introduced there. In terms of the arts, though, the cultural impact of the arts had a very limited impact on the working man. If you ploughed the field all day, you wouldn't have been, I don't know, going to the theatre because there weren't any theatres. Or if there were any theatres, they'd be in London or Stratford-upon-Avon, places like that. There would have been cultural centres. Again, Shakespeare, we have to bring Shakespeare into this. Again, there is a cultural icon that we can all relate to, someone whose impact still looms large over us and who actually has great influence over our language. Many sayings and idioms were created by William Shakespeare. Old Shakespeare himself. Couldn't spell his own name properly, apparently. So let's talk more about the arts. So again, if you were someone of medieval times, you would have come through music via the wandering minstrel. There may have been plays, passion plays. Again, religion played out in the village, but cultural impact would have been fairly minimal. It would have been more for entertainment. It wouldn't have necessarily had much influence over the individual, other than, like I say, the religious aspect of it. If we bring it forward to like the Renaissance, a lot of art came out from patrons. A lot of the art that was created was created for religion. Religion looms large because they had the money. They could pay the artists. The Sistine Chapel, that doesn't get painted for nothing. It takes a lot of effort and a lot of money to pull that one off. You're not just going to get any old dodgy decorator in to to paint your ceilings. So I'm trying to get closer to the 20th century. So yeah, again in Europe, you saw music become established by the classical composers, and there would have been theatres. Again, the world of theatre would have become commonplace in the 18th century, into the 19th century, and a lot of that music still, the classical music is still around today as a universal appeal. But there's one reason why it still appeals is because it's fallen out of the realm of copyright. So you can perform it. It can be used in commercials, TV, movies, whatever those things are, without having to pay somebody else for the permission for it. But again, classical music of its time was for the elites. People would have paid for entrance. At the lower end of the scale, you'd have had things like musical in the music hall theatre, the vaudeville for the Americans out there, and that would have been at the cheap seats, as it were. That again typically takes you back to Victoriana, those times. But again, culture would have still been something that many people wouldn't have had access to. It would have still been for a few people. There wasn't mass culture, and this is what we're heading towards. It is very compressed. I'm really kind of just trying to paint a picture of the cultural landscape and how culture is all pervasive now. There is a cultural watershed moment as we enter the 20th century. The 20th century is where it really all happens, and it's all pushed forward via technology. All right. Well, again, we can rewind back a bit to William Caxton and the printing presses. That was a very important cultural moment because people could, copy words. This is where copyright comes from, the copyright law, because it was the right to copy books. That law goes all the way back to the times of Caxton, and people would have had access to books. Again, for the rich, people didn't read. They couldn't read. The master didn't want the servant reading. That would be no good, would it? So it takes a long time for education to catch up with all these books that are out there, but libraries are formed. There were libraries back in the olden days, in ancient Greece and in Rome, but again, it was all handwritten, hard to preserve, especially if there was war or fire or collapse of civilization. But now, with the printing press, those words and those ideas could be preserved for many, many years. Again, some of those books still exist, those original books printed. So again, mechanisation of culture. That's what you're seeing here, the mechanisation of culture, the ability to print. So you can print music, you can print scripts for plays, you can, of course, do books. Even art can be reprinted. And so the mechanisation, the technology of culture is intertwined, and the development of this is very important to this great cultural shift in the 20th century. Because before that, again, people would have, they wouldn't have had much access to culture. They may have, gone to a gallery once in a while, but not everyone. It's a certain class of person. Culture wasn't accessible by the everyman to the level that we experience now. And this is what you've got to remember. It would have been a very different time. Stories would have been told anecdotally, maybe in the pub, in the bar. That's where stories. That's oral storytelling is something that's kind of lost now. This is what I'm doing at the moment. I'm telling you a story, aren't I? So anyway, we hit the 20th century, and this is where all the technology happens very close together. You get the record, the early recordings. That's the late 19th century. We get photography. All that happens in the late 19th century, but again, it's the 20th century where this is all refined and improved upon. And film, We get film. The idea that culture can be mass marketed, people can go, instead of go to the theatre, you can put, who wants theatres when you can have cinemas where you can re-show a play, a film, over and over again mechanically. You don't, the actors don't get tired because it's a mechanical process. The same with audio. You can play the record over and over again without the musician getting tired. Before the record, there was a market in actual printed music scores, because people used to play them, and it was frowned upon if you had a memory for music and you played in your local bar, in your local tavern. It was frowned upon unless you'd actually bought the score, But of course, some people had good memories. But yeah, music used to be sold in sheet form, and that was an industry in itself, and that got wiped out by the record. And so you see various formats superseding the other. So we go from movies, black and white movies, to black and white movies with sound, to those movies moving into colour, Technicolor. The same with television, with radio. Radio goes from long wave, shortwave, medium wave, FM, stereo, DAB, digital radio. Now it's internet radio. Everything becomes refined. And again, the same with film. Before the 1980s, nobody owned movies. Only real collectors owned movies on, actual movie reels, and they have private screenings of movies. Some of these, private screenings were for adult material. Again, that's a whole subset of culture that we can talk about, but is also very important because it's the adult industry that actually pushes the technology. We wouldn't have all the online banking that we have now, and online payment systems, if it wasn't for adult websites back in the late 90s. Interesting fact that. But I'm getting way off the topic, and we don't want to get obsessed about pornography at this stage of the talk. So yeah, we hit a golden era, and it's from like the 50s onwards, because it's this real good culmination of culture happening. You have the post-war. Post-war is very important because it's the invention of the teenager. Before the war, there was no such thing as a teenager because you were expected to leave school at 12, go out and get a job. Again, my own grandmother detailed her experiences. She wanted to stay on at school, but her father said, no, you've got to go out and work. That was how it used to be back in the day. But after the war, the teenager was invented, and this coincided with the music industry. The music industry came. It came. Forget those fusty classical records that you had, on shellac. You don't need those 78s. We got the 45, and then into the 60s, the 33 stereo, the cassette. Into the 80s, the CD. We don't need to talk about what happened in the late 90s with MP3 and digital music. But yeah, back to the 50s, a whole industry is created almost overnight with music serving the teenager. You've also got movies. That has an old audience now. After the war, people want entertainment. They want entertaining. So we see the film industry ramping up. Hollywood becomes, you had the golden era of Hollywood, but then there's like a second phase of it. And as we move through the 60s, in the 70s, you have the blockbuster, the summer blockbuster, Jaws. And movies become this multi-million-dollar enterprise, and wow, and the glitz and glamour that come with it. And culturally speaking, movies become really important because we quote them. I think you're going to need a bigger boat. We look towards the stars. Yeah, we had it before in the golden age of Hollywood, but now it's even more so. And this lasts for a while. But what I'm heading towards is this idea of post-culturalism, of where we're in, what the moment we're in now. So yeah, everything is bubbling along. The industries, all these cultural industries are doing very, very well for themselves, and they kind of peak around the mid-90s. Really, everything is doing very well. Music sales are up. Movies, like I say, is a multi-billion-dollar industry. You've got the gaming industry, which grows throughout the 90s and into the 2000s to become an industry that eclipses the movie industry, which is something that I was amazed. It amazed me back then. And culture has become an intrinsic part of our lives. And yeah, people now will go to the theatre, they will go to the cinema, they will go to the art gallery, they will go and look at a statue, a sculpture. And they'll also have culture in their lives, whether it be via books, via music, via radio, via TV. It is everywhere. Culture is all around us. We are enveloped in culture. So we now live in a post-cultural age. And what that means is that culture is readily accessible. Culture is available to everyone. It's been democratized. I always trip over that word. It's been democratized, and even schlubs like me can vanity publish, you'd call it, their own music or writing or art or whatever via the internet. The whole change happened with the internet. The internet tips us into the post-cultural age that we're in now, and we are, like I say, 25 years into the millennia, and there's been a real shift in the last, crikey, it's even been the last 10 years, but you've seen a real downturn in how important culture is now. And it is all down to the internet, I'm afraid, the way that the mainstream culture has adopted it. Now, when the internet first came about, again, from the late 80s, the very first faltering steps, to when it became, again, more widely available, probably say about mid-90s, there wasn't much internet culture because of the speed of download. You could take half an hour to download a picture. There was no video, there was no audio. But as, again, the technology caught up, we saw things change. And again, it all coincides with high-speed internet and the creation of the MP3 format, MPEG audio, layer 3, I think is what it's called, Fraunhofer. I'm probably remembering it wrong. I don't script any of this, I'm just doing it out of my grey matter, remember that. And so there was this point where everything kind of collides, and with the advent of high-speed internet and broadband, and it used to be DSL lines back in the day, and now it's 5G. Maybe there'll be a 6G, 8G, 10G, who knows when you're watching this. But the technology has enabled us to have our entire cultural life in the palm of our hands now, thanks to mobile phones, smartphones. Again, this is something that has happened in the last 15 to 20 years. And so we have reached this tipping point of post-culturalism. And it's not necessarily a good place to be. In the oldie days, there was an industry, and an industry makes money, right? It's important to make money, and so whether it be music, whether it be film, books, TV, whatever, you want a new thing. There's always going to be a new thing coming, a new thing. Because if there's a new thing, people will go, hey, there's a new thing at the cinema, record shop, wherever, whichever cultural outlet you belong to. Pa-ching! It's money going into my bank account. I really ought to mute that kind of thing. So whichever outlet you go to, there's a new thing. New thing keeps people interested. New thing, you hand over your money. You pay to see new thing. Nobody wants to see old things over and over again. The new thing the new sound, the new image, the new vision, the new book, the new story is king, is paramount. And that goes for a while. And a lot, again, music culture is fascinating because you have music and fashion in simpatico. It was a beautiful time from the 50s onwards, with the early faltering steps of rock and roll and rockabilly, into the 60s with the mods and rockers, the hippies, then you go into the 70s and we have the glam rock morphing into punk, morphing into new romantics, morphing into whatever scene there were in the 80s. There were many different scenes culminating in the rave dance culture, baggy culture of the late 80s, early 90s, into the big umbrella term that's Britpop. And then it all kind of comes to an end. And like I said, this was art, this was fashion, this was music, even movies in the 90s. There were Britpop movies. If you think of things like Trainspotting, Human Traffic, movies like that, it was a culmination of all the cultural, all the arts coming together. A perfect wave. And now we're here. And then the millennia happens, and like I said, high-speed broadband is commonplace. Everyone can start. Why bother buying a record when you can stream it or download it illicitly or even buy it? We get the advent of streaming services, which again, not just music. We have streaming services with TV, movies. Then we have this. We have YouTube, where everyone can become a creator. We have social media, where everyone can become a creator, become an influencer. And so now we don't have what we used to have in the old day. In the oldie days, we had cultural touchstones. We had the tastemakers, the reviewers, the magazines. Again, magazines are gone now. Even websites have gone. There are no tastemakers anymore because nobody needs them. Because nobody needs music, nobody needs movies, nobody needs TV, nobody needs books, nobody needs art, nobody needs photography, because we are all artists now. We're all writers, we're all photographers, we're all movie makers, we're all pornographers, we are all everything all at once because we now are all post-cultural people. And the problem with that is we have nothing in common anymore. There is no commonality. And this is why you and I are feeling a little bit, if you grew up if you were born in the 50s, you probably hit the golden wave. You got probably the best wave of it. But again, I was born in the early 70s, so I got to experience all the computer gaming stuff, So I think if you're born like 50s to 80s, you're kind of in a nice wave of that cultural path. It's you just hit the wake of a really good moment. But we've kind of hit this point now where there are no tastemakers, and culture is so dilute and so diverse and so wide. It's impossible for us to have anything in common with each other, right? And this is the great shame. This is what post-culturalism has led to. It's led to a real feeling of disconnectedness because, hey, did you hear that song on the radio? Did you see that video on Top of the Pops? Hey, that movie that's on. Hey, that book, have you read that book that's out this week? Nobody operates like that anymore. If there's something on, if there's a hit, and I use the word hit very lightly because the viewing figures on Netflix and all these are laughable. There's a show on at the moment called Baby Reindeer, and they say, oh, it's a hit. It's had something like 3.5 million views. And that's nothing. That used to be the average viewership of a show on BBC Two at prime time back in the day. And that you've got to again factor into the fact that at the point of doing this, I think Netflix has about 60 million subscribers. And worldwide, there are so many billion potential viewers because, streaming is a worldwide stage. You realise that these things are very much now niche. They're not niche. So, okay, you watch a show. There's a big hit show on, and you watch it. Now, you've got choices. Do you watch it all at once? Do you binge it? Are you a binger? Or are you somebody who likes to maybe take an episode in here and there? Or, on some cases, they still put out one episode a week. But you may say to a acquaintance, a work colleague, I don't know what these things are. I don't have any friends. That's why I'm making this. That's why I spend my time thinking about this. You may say to them, have you seen XYZ? And they'll say, no, but I'm going to. Or they might say, yes, I am, but don't tell me because I'm only on the first episode. There'll be very rarely that everyone would have seen everything in synchronous. This isn't the old days when you might have seen, I don't know, again, as a kid, we watched The Young Ones on BBC Two, a comedy TV show from the 1980s, and we used to recite it the next day. Same with shows like Blackadder and Monty Python, if you want to go back to the 60s and 70s. You'd recite sketches, and kids who watched it got together and you became little friendship groups, and you'd recite and perform the sketches, and it became part of your culture. There is none of that anymore. If you say they don't like it Upham, people will just look at you perplexed. Some people understand what I'm saying, of a certain ilk, of a certain age, but it's not cushy anymore. And this is how culture has been totally ripped apart and taken away from us and been totally diluted. We're actually turning back to those serfs. We are digital serfs now. Those people that will work in the field, they would have only had things in common with other people in that village. If I know one of their workers had fell in a ditch, they said, did you see he fell in a ditch? And that would be the story. This is it now. You're limited now to very small networks of influence. Before, our cultural influence could be seen as a well. It was kind of small, but very, very deep. There were lots of layers, very deep wells of cultural influence that you could explore, very deep. Now, you can think of it very much as a very thin ocean. It's very, very wide, but it's not very deep. There's not a lot to explore. It's just kind of very, very wide. And you don't get those connections now that you used to get. And so this is what post-culturalism is. It's the total and utter accessibility of culture. And my daughter describes it. I mean, a lot of this, I listen to what my daughter says. TikTok and social media like that has a huge influence, and I think a very dangerous influence on younger people. It's affected their ability to concentrate. Everything is micro-dosed. Their entertainment is in 30-second clips. My daughter can't be doing with that. She's enjoying movies and albums. She's discovered music, and her art teacher has the radio on sometimes, and the song will come up on Talking Heads. And the song comes on, same as it ever was, once in a lifetime. And my daughter sings along with it, and her friend goes, well, what is this? And looks at her as she's an alien. And my daughter says, well, this is Talking Heads. This is once in a lifetime. Brian Eno doing the backing vote, because she's hung around with me too long. And her friend looks at her as if she's literally come down from Mars. And so my daughter feels very alienated because there is nobody out there that shares her cultural influences. They don't even share cultural influences with each other, because one person will be watching one TikTok and it's all, again, this is another aspect I need to fold into this, is algorithms. Have you got the algorithm? We've got the algorithm. Everything you watch now is dictated to via algorithm. There is no free will. There is no choice anymore. Even this video. The chances are that you've not seen this because the algorithm said you don't want to watch this video. I don't know who's going to watch this video, because it's very unlikely that anyone's going to see it, because I'm not part of the algorithm, right? I'm an outlier, right? This is not popular. This is not a popular opinion, so it will not be served up. I need you to like and subscribe in order to fuck the algorithm. But yeah, everything now is algorithmically generated. Playlists on Spotify, suggestions on Netflix, YouTube, TikTok, Facebook. Even Twitter, I think, has a feed that is suggested, that you may be of interest, that may interest you. Even shopping on Amazon, it looks at what you may. Do you want some more black bin bags? No, I've already bought some. Yeah, but we got some more. Here, look, have you thought of buying these black bin bags? You see, and that's the algorithm. It doesn't give you things that are going to challenge you or, entertain you. It will just give you more of the same slop. You like this slop, here's some more slop of the same. And that goes against what culture used to be about. Culture used to be about delivering new things, exciting things, different takes on the world. But here's some more slop that you like. Until in the end, it's going to collapse in on itself. It's a giant souffle waiting to collapse. And a lot of these media outlets are creating content, the C word, content for an audience that doesn't exist. They talk about diversity and inclusion, and there's nothing wrong with that. Right? You're looking at somebody, I love the films of Derek Jarman, right? Look him up. There's a subversive, Andy Warhol. Jesus, there's a name. Names that have been forgotten, because once you die, it all dies with you. But we talk about all these buzzwords because they think it's money. They think it's going to generate them, an audience. And this is where post-culturalism has led us to the marketer, the people that make these decisions, thinking, if we're inclusive, people are going to watch this. That's not how it works. It's not how it works. That's not how any of it works. Go back to the 80s. There are plenty of diverse stories that are told. My Beautiful Laundrette, The Crying Game, going into the 90s. Priscilla, Queen of the Desert. Just watched that the other weekend. There are plenty of films there that come along every so often. Every so often. There'll be a film that touches the public consciousness. Not anymore. Not anymore, because it's done by committee. Those things were just outliers that popped through, that broke through, but not anymore. Now it's done by committee because they're creating culture for an audience that doesn't exist. So it's never going to be seen. Nobody cares. And that's the thing. Nobody cares anymore. And you're going to see I sound so apocalyptic because it is, but what you're going to see is the great homogenous shift where all this stuff just gets bought up, maybe by Disney. You've already seen Disney do a lot of the hard work already, but a lot of the streaming services, to talk specifically about movies and TV, will not be able to sustain this because not everybody wants to pay X amount a month for the same slop. And they're going to all amalgamate. They're all going to be. You've seen it happen. You've seen it happen before in British television in the 90s. Margaret Thatcher said, "Oh, you want choice," and so they made all the TV companies independent and had to bid for the contract. Now there's only one ITV company because it all got merged. Because that's what happens, and it will happen in all these industries. Because that's what happens. Because it's not infinite. It's all finite. We live on finite ideas. There are no new ideas. Oh, I sound like an old man waving his fist at a cloud. But there aren't. There are there are no new ideas or any old ideas, but presented in a new way. But that kind of art isn't allowed to flourish anymore because it's got to be done by committee. It's got to be this. It's got to be that many people in it. It's got to this thing, that and you can't create art by committee. And I'm going a bit off tangent here, I feel. So I'm going to bring it back to post-culturalism. And this is where we are with post-culturalism. It's that sense that there's everything happening all at once, but nothing is really happening. You know, when have you been last properly moved by a piece of music or a film? You know, and this is something that's happened in the last 10 years. It's really, I do think it's dangerous, because I do think we do kind of we need culture for us to have a commonality with people. We need catchphrases. We need those adverts that are on the television that we can quote. You know, we need things to that shared human experience. We don't have that anymore. We've become incredibly fragmented, and that is all down to the black mirror that we hold in our hand and that we hang over. It will be the end of us. It will be the end of us. Because imagine, where does post-culturalism lead us? It leads us to someone being in the White House or in control of a major country, maybe Russia, maybe America. But imagine a future where a millennial or a Generation Z or Z person is in a position of ultimate power, and all they've ever been used to is arguing on social media, you know, and they cancel people. They block them. They get them banned. Get their opponents banned from a platform. They get their work taken away from them. You know, cancel culture, culture wars, all that crap, right? You know, there's all that going on. And this is part of post-culturalism. Oh God, there's another aspect to it that I haven't even touched on. But imagine someone like that being in control of the nuclear button, and somebody stepping out of line, not doing what they want, you know, squaring up to them. It's going to be tantalising for them to hit the ultimate block button, isn't it? And that's where our future lies, in stopping somebody who doesn't understand how discourse works, because they don't have our arguments anymore, because the internet and post-culturalism has taken our ability to argue away, because everybody wants to be on the right side of history. Everybody wants to be right. And do you think the Greeks thought they were wrong when, again, they used to do all sorts of dubious things? Slavery, you know, children. I've got to be careful what I say. Same with the Romans, you know. Those societies thought they were right back in the day, and then we judged them with modern eyes. And it's the same in the future. 100 years into the future, that society will judge us. There is no such thing as being on the right side of history. And this is where the internet and post-culturalism has led us. It's led us to a cultural cul-de-sac, you know, and ultimately we are creating generations of disconnected. And that's what I thought the internet was going to be, so good and so positive. And this is what upsets me about it, is it's become ultimately destructive. And there are so many things I could say about this. You know, there are positives in it. There's me, for example, here talking to you now. You know, we can connect, and I'll happily disagree with you. We don't have to get angry with each other. We don't have to block each other. Now, if you disagree with me, I will block you. A lot of people don't get that joke. But yeah, the ability to understand nuance, to understand irony, has all been destroyed by the internet and post-culturalism. And this is where we're at. And I'm not sure exactly what the purpose of this is, this little talk is. I think it's meant to say, look, put down your phones and go for a walk or something. I don't know. Not even that, because I do think the internet is a great tool. But I think we've become so self-obsessed. It's turned us into utter introverts. But not in a good way, cultural introverts. You know? What is your culture? I mean, it's become so ridiculous now that we talk about self-identification. Somebody on the Facebook the other day said to me, you self-identify as a musician. And I said, no, I don't self-identify as a musician. I am a musician because that's one of the things I do. You know, like in a previous life I was a writer. I didn't identify as a writer. It's just I paid to write. Music makes me a little bit of money. Doing these videos, it makes me a bit of money. Therefore, that's one of the things. That's one of the skills that I can attribute to myself. You know, that's not self-identifying. I self-identify as Darren. That's who I am. And this is where it's led us. It's led us to this very, again, I hate to use the N-word, narcissism. It's led us to a very narcissistic, introspective culture, which doesn't learn. It learns nothing. It just thinks it's completely and utterly right. And sometimes there's no harm in being wrong, because when you're wrong, you learn things. You know, it helps you kind of firm up the world in your head, the world order. You go, oh wow, I didn't realise things work this way, and I don't think anyone can do that anymore. And this is where post-culturalism has led us. It's led us to vast tracts of ignorance, an inability to understand a lot of nuance that's out there because the internet, and a fragmented cultural society. And yeah, that's what this video is. We are now digital serfs. That's what you are. We're a digital serf. And yeah, culturally, we're I think a very dangerous aspect. I really do. I think as humanity, we're asked to take on all manner of causes that don't actually relate to us, because that distracts us from what's going on in our in our neighbourhood. Look over there. There's something bad happening over there. Meanwhile, what's happening here is ignored. And again, that's post-culturalism. You know, we wouldn't have had this before the internet. We wouldn't have had this years ago. And that's fed into that whole, I want to be good. I want to be a good person. Rather than going out and doing good things, you wave a banner you don't understand on a march you don't understand, to support a cause you don't understand, that you have no bearing on. And yeah, I would say it's the blind leading the blind, but I think it's the stupid leading the stupider. And that doesn't mean you can't be empathetic and you can't care. It's just change comes at home. You can't change something that's over there, but you can change what's here. And people don't understand that because of the internet. The internet makes you think that everything is accessible, and it isn't. You know, that's my point. You're going to think, oh, he doesn't care about the world. I do care about the world, but I realised a long time ago that I have no influence over it. I am nothing. I'm merely a bug crawling over its surface, and so are you. And sometimes you've got to have the humility of understanding your role in the world, and that you are nothing, and that these decisions are already made by other people who are not fit to make those decisions. And you can either worry about that or just get on with your life. And I think it's time to get on with our lives. Sorry for taking up so much of your time. I've whittled on. I'm ever so sorry. But yeah, post-culturalism. It's a bit like post-industrialism in the fact that we've reached total and utter saturation point of culture, to the point that no one's connected anymore. You know, everybody is totally disconnected from each other, and we don't have a shared common culture. Even down to our food, because you can get any food you want at any time delivered to your door by somebody on slave wages. What a wonderful world we live in. Digital slavery. There you go. You're not only a digital serf, but you're also a digital slave. And we'll end it there. Please tell me how wrong I am in the comment box below. I dare you. I double dare you, motherfucker. Make my day. Go on. Thank you for watching. We're all doomed. Ta-ta.